Supervillains are often portrayed as ruthless and cunning, with no regard for the safety or well-being of others. Their twisted ideologies and desire for control over others makes them a formidable threat to those who stand in their way. And then there's their character design and power sets to consider on top of all of that. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda, and this is the top 10 scariest Marvel Comics villains. What are you afraid of? Number 10. The Maker. The Maker is one of the creepiest villains out there, but at the same time, he also seems like one of the saddest as well, at least at the beginning of Ultimate Invasion. And honestly, there are undertones of that throughout, I would say, the Ultimate continuity for him. Who is the Maker? He's the version of Reed Richards who we normally know as Mr. Fantastic, who hails from the reality of Earth 1610, known as the Ultimate or Ultimates reality. What makes him so scary? Perhaps the realization that Reed potentially makes an even more formidable villain than he does a hero. He's like Reed without the moral code. I mean, he is Reed without the moral code. That's literally who he is. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that subscribe. And make sure you have that bell on so you don't miss out on any of our good old nerdy notifications. Number 9. REAVERS. Over the years, the REAVERS have become scarier and scarier as a group of villains. Initially, the REAVERS were members of the Hellfire Club, in a way belonging to the Hellfire Club's elite team of bodyguards, their own personal militia known as the Hellfire Knight. After being taken by Mojo and repurposed, they were turned into cyborgs, who have become more and more horrific as the years have progressed in terms of their appearance. The REAVERS would go on to become affiliated with Spiral, Lady Deathstrike, and of course, Donald Pierce. Initially, they just look like eccentric 80s and 90s villains, but in the modern age, they look more like mad science experiments gone wrong, with the weapons that they wield becoming integrated with their own bodies, a part of that. Before, they were some of my favorite comedic relief in terms of comic book villains, and now they're more like nightmare fuel. Number 8. Mistress Death. What is one of the greatest fears that most people have? Death, of course. The end of life and the journey into the unknown. I think we're the most afraid of death because we just don't really know what comes next. It is the end of something, which honestly already tends to scare us humans, just the idea of something ending, but it also represents a massive change for us, moving from the realm of the living to the non-living, and whatever comes after that, if anything does at all. Hence, Mistress Death has to be one of the most terrifying villains we have at Marvel Comics. Now, granted, Mistress Death isn't really a straight up villain. She's less of a villain and more of like a concept. Everything must die, and we've also seen what the world would be like without her doing her job. See Marvel's Cancerverse. Yeah, not so pretty. But at the same time, the idea of death still scares us, and although she isn't really taking life maliciously, it's easy to see her as a villain when she preys on the fears of so many in the Marvel multiverse, and the fears of us as readers in the real world too. Number 7. Malice. When it comes to Malice, I think the reason why she scares me so much is my fear of possession. I just think of Malice taking over people's bodies, making heroes perform as they normally would not, and I'm honestly terrified of that. Malice has been a few different people in the comics, and I'm not sure if we've ever really clarified if they were the same entity or not as some of the other Malices that we've had. There is Malice as in Alice McAllister, who can exist as a purely psionic being and has done so in the past, possessing various X-Men members such as Lorna Dane, Psylocke, and even Storm for a time. And there is Malice as in the darker persona of Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, which takes control of the Invisible Woman and who apparently was made manifest during the Psycho Man's attack on New York. Pretty sure these are two separate entities, but I think it's also really interesting that they both kind of like possess people and they're also both named Malice, so I just decided to include them together because you never know. You never know. Those could be connected at some point. Number 6. Dormammu. When it comes to ghoulies that exist less in the physical world and more in other dimensions, Dormammu is one of the folks who really reigns supreme. Why is Dormammu one of the most horrifying villains Marvel has to offer? Probably because he's just so darn powerful. Also, we don't call him the Dread Dormammu, the Dread Lord Dormammu, for nothing. He rules the dark dimension, which he conquered, and he isn't afraid to mess you up in honestly really terrible ways. I feel like being killed by Dormammu or his forces would actually be a mercy, considering all the terrible ways I've seen him torment his foes, both in the comics and honestly outside of them as well. Number 5. Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova just creeps me out, even just to look at her. Often the way she is drawn is what disturbs me the most, but at the same time, she is drawn in a way that makes sense when you consider just how terrifying she is from a power set standpoint and in regards to how twisted her mind is. I feel like we draw her like how she is on the inside. She's like really creepy on the outside, and it's representing what she's got going inside, you know what I mean? Which is really creepy and really gross. Cassandra Nova doesn't often think twice when it comes to pulling off unspeakable acts of horror. She will turn you inside out if she feels she needs to, or simply just if she wants to. And honestly, she can do that. At least from a psionic standpoint, and maybe even from a physical standpoint too. There's a few things that have happened, not quite sure what happened with her, but I was creepy and I don't want it to happen to me, I'll tell you that much. Cassandra Nova is one of the most powerful telepaths and psionic characters we have in Marvel Comics, and she just so happens to be a villain, usually, who until recently didn't even possess a sense of empathy. So, this has led her to slaughter millions without even batting an eye. In fact, she's probably less likely to blink and more likely to stare intently while she does this, as she laughs maniacally afterward. Number 4. Galactus. Have you seen Galactus? I don't think I need to justify why he's so scary. So instead, I'm just gonna talk a bit about the time that he took on Dazzler as one of his heralds. This was also a pretty scary time for me as a reader, because during that whole issue, during that whole story, I was wondering if Dazzler would ever get to go back home to Earth to continue to pursue her career as a singer. Seriously, when Dazzler goes on these wacky adventures in the comics, I'm always left worrying about if she's missing singing gigs back home. Like, I'm like, is there a concert going on right now? Like, will she ever recover her career? No, but in all seriousness, Galactus is scary not just because he is gigantic, though honestly there is also that pretty terrifying, especially scary for those who have megalophobia, a fear of gigantic things. He's also scary because in many ways he is inevitable. Although I believe Galactus is still currently deceased in the comics, it has been implied and stated on multiple occasions in the past that his existence is necessary for the cosmos to be in balance and continue on forward, implying that even when he's gone, we have to deal with the fear of what might happen to the universe and even perhaps the multiverse in his absence, which is now. Number 3. Tarn the Uncaring. Just thinking about Tarn sends shivers down my spine. Tarn is or was one of the Iraqi mutants. He was kinda like the Araco version of Krakoa's Mr. Sinister, except that Tarn is an Omega level mutant who also has magic-based powers as well. Tarn's powers are mainly psionic in nature, granting him the ability to read minds while also causing immense pain to his target. Not only is he telepathic, but he's also an immensely powerful telekinetic as well. Like Mr. Sinister, he is obsessed with evolution and genes, and is capable of altering the genetic makeup of other mutants, even taking their powers away or simply malforming them to the point that they can no longer function. The Locust Vile are what Tarn calls his loyal servants, who see him basically as a god. These Iraqi mutants are Tarn's experiments. While most don't survive his experimentation process, the ones who do worship him as their god and join his Locust Vile. Tarn also has the ability to teleport too, so he could just like pop up beside you and then literally turn you into a pile of painful goo. Pretty scary stuff. Number 2. Null. Null is basically the biggest, baddest symbiote around. Yeah, you thought Venom was scary? You thought Carnage was scary? Well, I mean, you're right. Both of those symbiotic characters are pretty scary. But without Null, neither would even exist, so think about that. Null is the god of symbiotes and also wields a symbiotic army complete with symbiotic dragons as well. I mean, yeah. Number 1. The Many-Angled Ones, aka Marvel's version of the Elder Gods. Or at least one of their versions, I would say. What could be scarier in any reality, honestly? Yep, Marvel also has their own Elder Gods who have been known sometimes as the Many-Angled Ones. What do the Many-Angled Ones get up to? Well, when they invade the reality known as Earth 10011, they warp it into something horrifically twisted. After they have influenced and invaded this reality successfully, death is eliminated and life runs rampant and unchecked, with many prominent figures in this reality pledging themselves to the Many-Angled Ones. And if you think that eliminating death would be a good thing, just check out this universe. We'd come to know this reality as the Cancerverse. For a while, the Many-Angled Ones and the Cancerverse actually threatened the entire multiverse, attempting at first to invade Earth 616, which is our main comic book continuity. Fortunately, they did not succeed in their attempt, but if they had, that should be like a what if issue. What if they did that? Does that exist? If it exists, let me know what issue it is so I can look it up and read it. That's about it. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.